Assalamualaikum and a very good day to everyone and Shafis. My name is Alisya Binti Asrul Helmi. We are from KBA2425A. So, I will talk about on the impacts of the coronavirus disease to university, and we had 3 impacts about it. First, unemployment in socially disadvantaged communities. At the individuals and communal levels, unemployment has deleterious impacts on numerous dimensions, including psychological, economic, and social well-being. Even when the epidemic first struck, the impacts was so quick and devastating that both sorts of communities had identical amounts of unemployment. Second, individuals applied to fund their living costs. University students often rely on casual employment in the industry sectors that have been most affected by MPIs, such as in cafes and restaurants, or as an assistant in non-essential retail. Comprehensive analysis from major study in the United States had conducted during the early days of crisis in April 2020 uncovered a clear correlation between COVID-19, financial shocks, and negative impacts on the academic progress of the poor students. Third, the students' mental health. Specifically for students, the emergency transition to online learning had mixed satisfaction outcomes and has to be found a stressor, particularly when associated with increased workloads and where the learning technologies or internet connectivity is inadequate. The vulnerability of family members to COVID-19 infections has emerged as a source of worry for many students.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To Sir Shafis, my name is Muhammad Azzarul Farhan bin Muhammad Azahar, and today in this group presentation, I will be presenting to you what is risk management. Risk management is a systematic approach to identify, control, and measure risks that can threaten assets and earnings of oneself, which can be a business or an organization. There are 3 types of objective in risk management. The first is primary objective. The primary objectives of risk management are to preserve the operating effectiveness, to achieve humanitarian goals, and to utilize cost, resources, and social responsibility. The second type of objective for risk management is pre-loss objectives. Pre-loss objectives is required by the law and regulators. It is done to reduce and minimize the impact of loss, and also to reduce the fear and worry of the parties concerned. Last but not least, we have post-loss objective, which is done to reduce the impact of loss to an organization and also to the society itself. It is done to preserve the survival of the organization and the continuation of the business. Moving on to the risk management process that is discussed throughout our assignment. The risk management process can be simply defined as a framework of actions that can be taken when we want to deal with risk. There are 5 basic steps listed under the process of risk management. The initial step is to identify the existing and potential risks. In our case, we are required to identify the risks that a university is exposed to when facing COVID-19. After identifying the existing and potential risks, it is important for us to evaluate the potential risks and rank them according to their severity, as this will organize and put the risk management process in a more sophisticated manner. After evaluating them, we need to examine them in order for us to come up with solutions and alternatives to move on to the next step in the risk management process, which is selecting the best solution to the risk and implementing them in a management program under the process of risk management. The last step in the risk management process is to evaluate the outcome and review and control the risk management program that we have chosen to overcome the risks that we have identified during the risk management process. And with that said, my friends will further explain how we implement the risk management process into our assignment, which is the risk that COVID-19 exposes to the university.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Nadila Bastiar, and I will be presenting about the existing and potential risks that can cause harm to university due to COVID-19. First is education problem. During the pandemic, which lasted for months, all university students continued their education online. Although some students acknowledge that they learned new skills in the fields of electronics, informatics, and other computer software during the pandemic, most of them were unsatisfied about the quality and quantity of the given materials, online exams, and the evaluation processes. And also, unfortunately, some students have limited access to connectivity. Some do not have adequate IT equipment to attend online classes, and others cannot afford the extra cost to improve their IT resources. All in all, the unavailable external resources can impact the student learning experience. For example, interrupted learning, lack of participation in class discussion, absentees in class, and restraints to taking their final exams. Next is a financial problem. Under the economic lockdown and recession, more students may have difficulties in finding jobs or internships, which could negatively affect students' personal resource and their individual economic well-being. Students' subjective socioeconomic loss affects their life outcomes. Income changes during the pandemic affect the level of depressive symptoms. In other words, socioeconomic loss leads to increasing stress. For instance, many students rely on their part-time jobs to gain their living expenses, and due to the lockdown and economic crisis, they either cannot get a renewed contract or they become unemployed. Unemployment leads not only to earning loss but also to psychosocial asset loss, social withdrawal, and psychological and physical well-being loss. This leads to my last point, which is health problem. COVID-19 can have an impact on the mental health and psychosocial conditions of everyone, including university students. COVID-19 would lead to students' negative well-being because students may experience more stress related to the uncertainties in their academic success, negative economic impact, and lack of perceived support. For example, experiencing more workload, adapting to an online learning mode immediately and without sufficient preparation, and also include more worries due to the uncertainty and fear of the pandemic. Furthermore, poor sleeping habits, daily fitness routines, and social interaction significantly affected their health condition. The government imposed measures such as social distancing and restriction on travel, but they did not take into account the health implications. Although these measures are necessary to regulate safe condition, but there is no strategy to safeguard the psychological impact due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hello and Assalamualaikum. My name is Ahmad Luqman Hakim bin Patsullah, and now I will proceed with the next step, which is evaluating the potential risk. Okay, on this process, it mainly to answer the question of how much impact of the losses that can occur due to the risk. Okay, this is why we need to evaluate the risk and categorize it. Okay, and the categorize, it can be made based on two factors, which is frequency and severity. Okay, the frequency, it is referring to the number of times the loss occur, while the severity, it refers to the maximum size of loss exposed due to the risk. Okay, it is important to evaluate the risk because different level of risk require different risk management technique. To categorize the risk, we will need to refer it to the risk matrix beside me. Okay, based on the risk of COVID-19 to the educational sector that being given by the previous presenter, which is the educational problem, financial problem, and health problem. It can be categorized as you can see beside me, which is for the A, educational problem. It will be categorized in the box C, which is low frequency and high severity, because there is a low case of internet problem to study online, but it can have a huge impact on the student itself. And the same for the financial problem, because on nowadays everybody have internet and smartphone, tablet for the online learning, but there is some rare case at the outside of the city where there is still people with the less financial and it being difficult for them. So it can be categorized in C, which is low frequency but high severity. But for the point C, which is health problem, there is a high risk of the student can be infected with the COVID-19. So if the student go to the university, they will be face the risk of high frequency and high severity risk to being infected with the COVID-19. Examining alternative risk management technique. Okay, this is a process where after we evaluate the potential risk, we then examine the risk management technique that's suitable with the level of risk that after we evaluate before. Okay, under the risk management technique, there is a two tool, which is risk control and risk financing. Okay, under risk control, there is a risk avoidance, loss control, risk separation, risk contractual transfer, risk prevention, and last but not least, risk reduction. And then under risk financing, there is a risk retention, risk transfer, and risk hedging.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Hasanah Binti Ismail. So I will proceed to the next techniques in the risk assessment management process. So after we examining the alternative risk management techniques, we will continue to the step number 4, which is selecting and implementing risk management program. In order to answer the question whether we will use appropriate way to eliminate the risk, either control it or finance the risk when it cannot be eliminated, our group choose risk control. So the technique that we use under risk control is by implementing risk avoidance and loss prevention. So the first one is risk avoidance. Risk avoidance is a risk that is proactively avoided after rational consideration is taken. Possibility of loss we consider is at a zero. If someone is afraid of loss, the best way to deal with it is to avoid it. Risk avoidance in a general word can be said as a method for reduce the risk by not participating in activities that may incur injury, sickness, or death. For example, one way that has been implemented in our educational institution is our Minister of Education has implemented the temporary physical closure to the educational institution. For instance, in order to avoid and reduce the number of cases being increased, our educational institution has set for all the university students to do online distance learning or ODL in order to reduce the number of cases from keeping increased from time to time. So the next technique that can be implemented is by implementing the loss prevention. This method of risk management attempts to minimize the loss rather than completely eliminate it. While accepting the risk, it stays focused on keeping the loss contained and preventing it from spreading. For example, the preventive measure that has been taken in educational institutions is including the physical and social distancing. As we all know, our government has set the regulation where we need to keep our social distancing at least 1 meter. And the same thing has been implemented at many educational institutions in order to prevent the virus from spread easily. So lastly, or the fifth step in the risk management process is by evaluating, reviewing, and controlling the risk management program. Evaluating, reviewing, and controlling are very important in the risk management program for two reasons that need to be alert, which is things that gonna change. As we all know, right now we are in endemic phase where solutions that we implement in the past may not longer appropriate right now. Second thing that will be changed is new risk might be emerged and old risk will be disappear. There will be also mistaken that will be made in implementing the technique. The first one is risk exposure may be overlooked, and the second one, measures selected to address the risk may not have been the most appropriate.
In the event of tragic incidents, university students are at risk of psychological discomfort. The pandemic's trajectory is unknown, and it might have long-term implications for mental health. To regulate and lessen the burden of psychological issues, it is critical to research the most effective therapies, identify the susceptible populations, prepare for immediate and also the long-term psychological care. We advise that the university administrators should take assertive, proactive actions to assist their students' mental health and intellectual progress at all times, but especially throughout the times of instability and the crisis such as the COVID-19 epidemic. So that's all from us. Thank you.